It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to The World Today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up on the program. At least 30 bodies pulled from the Potomac River after a plane and helicopter collide mid-air over Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump says U.S. will send some 30,000 migrants to Guantanamo Bay. Plus, three Israelis and 5 Thai nationals are back in Israel after being held hostage in Gaza for more than 15 months. We begin with tragic news in the U.S., where officials say no survivors are expected to be found after a plane and helicopter collided midair over Washington, D.C.'s Potomac River. The American Airlines flight was carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members when it crashed with a Black Hawk helicopter as it approached Ronald Reagan National Airport. 3 soldiers were in the military aircraft. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says the body of the plane has been found in 3 different sections of the river in waist-deep water. Rescuers said that they were working in extremely rough conditions with ice on the water, while investigators are focusing on why the helicopter was flying at that location.
I speak for all of us when I say, and certainly all Washingtonians, how very sad we are for American Airlines, for the United States Department of Defense, and for all Americans for the loss of life that happened with the collision of these aircrafts. We know that includes families from across our region as well as in Kansas and across the country. This morning we all share in a profound sense of grief. I do want to thank the first responders who acted quickly last night, who ran towards danger, went into a very frigid river, and have worked throughout the night. Chief Donnelly reported in last night's briefing that we have a strong mutual aid agreement in our region, and those teams have worked together throughout the night in really tough and heartbreaking conditions, and we should all thank them for their heroic efforts.
A few details I'd like to give all of you, and some of you reported this, but last night, if you live in the D.C. area, you would know that this was a clear night last night. The helicopter was in a standard pattern. If you live in the D.C. area, you'll see helicopters up and down the river. This flight pattern is seen oftentimes when you live in D.C. This was a standard flight pattern last night as well. The American airline flight coming into land was in a standard flight pattern as it was coming into DCA. As many of you reported, we have located the 2 aircrafts. The fuselage of the American airline plane was inverted. It's been located in 3 different sections. It's in about waist-deep water. Safety is our expectation. Everyone who flies in American skies expects that we fly safely, that when you depart an airport, you get to your destination. That didn't happen last night. And I know that President Trump, his administration, the FAA, the DOT, we will not rest until we have answers for the families and for the flying public. You should be assured that when you fly, you're safe.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter.
I want to express my sincere condolences for the accident that happened at DCA last night. We're absolutely heartbroken for the family and loved ones of the passengers and crew members, and also for those that were on the military aircraft. Our focus right now is doing everything that we can to support all of those involved and also the PSA Airlines team. This is devastating. We are all hurting incredibly. American Eagle Flight 5342, operated by PSA Airlines, traveling from Wichita, Kansas to Reagan National Airport was involved in an accident just before 9 p.m. local time on final approach into Reagan National. It collided with a military aircraft on an otherwise normal approach. And at this time, we don't know why the military aircraft came into the path of the PSA aircraft.
And so a lot of effort was brought to bear. Unfortunately, we weren't able to rescue anyone, but we are in the recovery mode right now. And I just want to, last night I expressed the fact that we hope to open at 11 o'clock today, and that is still the case. We're going to open the airport at 11 o'clock.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has also been briefed on what he calls a terrible accident and questions why the helicopter didn't go up or down or even turn. Let's listen to more officials on the state of operations and investigations. John Donnelly is the chief of D.C. Fire and EMS, while Roger Marshall is a Kansas senator.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Donnelly, Chief of D.C. Fire and EMS. This evening at 8:48, an alert was sounded, initiating a large regional response to a report of an aircraft crash on approach to the airport. This response includes first the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority's Fire Department, the District of Columbia Fire Department, the Metropolitan Police Department, and the U.S. Park Police to respond into the area and to sort that out. At 8:58, the first units arrived on the scene and found an aircraft in the water and began rescue operations. This incident has grown. There's currently about 300 responders working. We have boats from all throughout the region, police and fire boats. We have a mutual aid agreement in Washington, D.C., the National Capital Region Mutual Aid Agreement administered by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and we're all operating under that. We're operating under a unified command. Everybody's together. So we also have requested state police helicopters from Maryland, and the Coast Guard helicopter is working. So this is a state and federal response as well. U.S. Coast Guard's got some boats in the water as well. So it's a highly complex operation. The conditions out there are extremely rough for the responders. It's cold. They're dealing with relatively windy conditions. Wind is hard out on the river. So they're out there working. We're doing everything we can to keep them safe.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Senator Moran and Mayor, Secretary. When one person dies, it's a tragedy, but when many, many, many people die, it's an unbearable sorrow. It's a heartbreak beyond measure. And I know Senator Moran and I are here just to say we care. We wish that there was more we could do, but unfortunately there doesn't seem much at this time. I want the folks to back home to just know that we care, that we love them, and that this is a time when we'll have to join arms together and help each other out. We've been through things like this before, through tornadoes and floods and things, but it's really hard when you lose, probably over 60 Kansans simultaneously. And I don't want to forget the pilots and the flight attendants, are do their job, and the military personnel we lost. All those lives are so valuable, and it is such a tragedy that we lost them.
Away from the crash, but still in the United States, President Donald Trump has ordered the construction of a migrant detention facility in Guantanamo Bay, which he said would hold as many as 30,000 people. He says the facility at the U.S. Navy base in Cuba, which could be separate from its high-security military prison, would house the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening American people. Guantanamo Bay has long been used to house immigrants, a practice that has been criticized by some human rights groups. Later on Wednesday, Mr. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, said that the facility would be expanded and run by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He said migrants could be transported there directly after being intercepted at sea by the U.S. Coast Guard, and that the highest detention standards would be applied.
Thank you.
In our first week in office, we set records, taking over 350 executive actions. That's not been done before. And it has reportedly been the single most effective opening week of any presidency in history. And we want to keep it that way. We want to keep it going. We want to keep it going. We've broken from decades of failed Washington policies and restored common sense and sanity to our government. We've unleashed American energy, and we've already achieved record low illegal immigration. As you see, there's nobody trying to get in. And that's what we've been waiting for a long time, and gotten woke ideologies out of our government and out of our military. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid have not been affected by any action we're taking in any way, shape, or form. We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud and abuse. In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs. How about that? We stopped an attempt to make an illicit payment for illegal alien resettlement. And we paused $1.7 billion in unauthorized payments to foreign organizations, including stopping more than $40 million that was on its way out the door to the very corrupt World Health Organization, which has not done its job and not done it properly. We also blocked $45 million for diversity scholarships in Burma. 45, that's a lot of money for diversity scholarships in Burma. Freeze, and the American people strongly support. We've gathered this afternoon to take another historic action. However, in a few moments, the Laken-Riley Act will become the very first bill that I proudly sign into law as the 47th president. And inflation was horrible. Many things were horrible during that administration. When you look at what took place in Afghanistan, the way they got out, not that they got out, but the way, so many things were horrible. But to me, this was the worst of all. It's a landmark law that we're doing today. It's going to save countless innocent American lives with the payments and types of payments affected by the...
In the meantime, President Trump's pick for U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been questioned by senators at his first confirmation hearing. The post of Health Secretary is a key federal government position that oversees public health issues, including medical research, food safety, and public welfare programs. Mr. Kennedy, who had been a vocal vaccine skeptic, was asked to explain his past comments on the COVID-19 vaccine and other immunizations. He also was asked about his views on abortion and his opinions on the U.S. food industry. His hearing was interrupted by shouting protesters, but he also received loud applause when he promised he would make America healthy again, a slogan used by the new administration.
Mr. Kennedy. Good morning. This hearing will come to order.
But I want to make sure the committee is clear about a few things. News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. I am pro-safety.
We'll have order. Please proceed, Mr. Kennedy.
I'm pro-safety. I worked for years to raise awareness about the mercury and toxic chemicals in fish, and nobody called me anti-fish. And I believe that that vaccines play a critical role in healthcare. All of my kids are vaccinated. I've written many books on vaccines. My first book in 2014 The first line of it is, I am not anti-vaccine, and the last line is, I am not anti-vaccine. I don't want to take food away from anybody. If you like a cheeseburger, a McDonald's cheeseburger, a Diet Coke, which my boss loves, and you should be able to get them. If you want to eat Hostess Twinkies, you should be able to do that. But you should know what the impacts are on your family and on your health.
You made almost $5 million from book deals, mostly promoting junk science. In 2021, in a book called The Measles Book, you wrote that parents had been, quote, misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease and that measles vaccines are necessary, safe, and effective. The reality is measles are in fact deadly and highly contagious, something that you should have learned after your lies contributed to the deaths of 83 people, most of them children, in a measles outbreak in Samoa. So my question here is, Mr. Kennedy, is measles deadly, yes or no?
The death rate from measles historically in this country in 1963, the year before the introduction of the vaccine, was 1 in 10,000. Let me explain what happened in Samoa. In Samoa in 2017 or 2015, there were 2 kids who died following the MMR vaccine. And the vaccination rates in Samoa dropped precipitously from about 63% to the mid-30s, so they've never been very high. And in 2018, 2 more kids died following the MMR vaccine, and the government of Samoa banned the MMR vaccine. I arrived a year later when vaccination rates were already below any previous level. I went there, nothing to do with vaccines. I went there to introduce a medical informatics system that would digitalize records in Samoa and make health delivery much more efficient. I never gave any public statement about vaccines. You cannot find a single Samoan who will say, I didn't get a vaccine because of Bobby Kennedy.
Let's get more of this. Maria Bird is our Washington, D.C. correspondent. She joins us now to take us through all that's been happening in the United States. Hello, Maria.
Hello, how are you?
Right, a terrible day in Washington with this plane crash that has killed several people. What's the update at this time on the operations going on? We understand it's no longer a rescue operation, but a recovery operation without much hope of finding survivors.
Yes, it has been stated now that we are on recovery, that the individuals, because of the temperatures of the water being at the freezing levels that we've been experiencing, and also due to the impact that was received. We're talking about 7 feet of water that this plane crashed into. And so when you think about that the depth of that water, it's not but so deep, and the type of impact. You had 64 passengers on that plane, and you had the helicopter which just collided. It just, at this point, they don't see where there's much hope. We're talking about now we're heading into potentially around over 12 hours since the actual crash occurred. And so that typically you don't find many survivors at that type of, after that much time has gone past. So it's been a very tough day for those in Washington, a very tough day for individuals who knew those loved ones that were commuting back. Here in the States, we have lots of regional airlines and airplanes, and this American Airlines plane was one that did several trips a day back and forth between Kansas City and Washington. There was national championship figure skaters on this plane. This is, I think, one that will be investigated to try to figure out how you had this collision that occurred less than a half a mile from actually landing. Individuals that were on the plane were already texting their loved ones saying that we are landing. So that type of crash to occur at that moment was, I think, unbelievable, and many people just don't know how that occurred.
What more are we learning from aviation officials, especially on how the helicopter was in the path of the passenger aircraft?
Well, what's being said at this time is that this helicopter was taking off, and this helicopter had 3 individuals, and they had checked in. So the commercial airlines has a specific tower it checks into for air traffic control. They knew they were coming into land. People knew that this plane, the other tower for helicopters for military aircrafts, had checked in, and they knew they were taking off as well. The challenge was they lost connectivity around the time they were trying to alert the helicopter, the path that they were going in. It appears as if the commercial airline, American Airlines, was on the appropriate path to land, but somehow it appears that this helicopter was not. They don't know how they lost connection because they did have connection at the check-in point.
And 30 bodies so far recovered. We know about 60 passengers, 4 crew members were on board. Talk to us about the next steps, most importantly, the identification of victims, when more bodies are brought out.
So 64 on the American Airlines commercial craft, 3 individuals on the helicopter. They are starting to identify most loved ones that knew that they're, you know the plane number that your loved one is traveling in on. They've been at the airport waiting for news around their loved one if they've been recovered. And so identification is starting now. We're not going to know how many individuals and the names until all families have been notified. And I expect that's going to be a couple days from now because of the number of people that were on this airline.
And what's the situation with the military helicopters? What's the military saying about, how this crash could have occurred?
The military, very interestingly enough, has not said a lot about how this could have occurred. You're talking about Black Hawk, and that's not just describing the helicopter. Now, what is stated is that the helicopter did see the airplane, the commercial airplane that was coming in, but the airplane probably could not because there was no lights on the helicopter. But these are highly skilled aircraft and pilots and crew members on that helicopter. So that's what's so very puzzling for many about how this crash occurred, because that Black Hawk is not just the name of an aircraft, it's the skill level of the individuals who are flying that aircraft.
And how are Americans reacting to this tragic accident?
Well, Americans are, just can't believe it. I think that right now it's really trying to figure out what happened. I think that's the greatest question. Is it how did this collision happen? And I think until the black box can be reviewed and notified to the individuals as to exactly what happened through, what is the black box saying, the black box both on the helicopter and the airplane, I think there are going to continue to be questions. I think there's concern. The Reagan National Airport is set to be opening back up. There's concern about it being opened back up while this is still an active investigation. And obviously just concerned about the future. How will we ensure that these type of occurrences don't happen again? And so that's going to be the call of action, is what are the next steps to ensure safety for those who are landing into this airport and also taking off, and knowing that there has been an increase in the number of flights coming in and out of Reagan National Airport. So potentially needing to revise that as well.
Right, away from that crash for the moment, President Trump's plans on sending illegal migrants to Guantanamo Bay, how is this expected to play out?
Well, I think people are a bit confused. They're not quite sure what that's going to look like. I think that the people are very clear on what's happening around deportation. They're very clear on the executive orders. But Guantanamo Bay, I think people obviously have had mixed opinions about Guantanamo Bay. That has been a highly political area for Americans for quite some time now. So I think that how it happens, if it happens, I think once we see that something is happening, I think you'll then see a greater outpour. I think right now people are trying to really understand, to your point, how this is going to work out, being as though this is, I think, not within what people are expecting to hear.
And we've also been seeing various confirmation hearings of Mr. Trump's cabinet, the latest being RFK Jr. as health secretary. Talk to us about what happened and how many more are left to be heard.
Well, that was obviously a very interesting confirmation hearing. We have seen before confirmation hearings that have gone back and forth between the individual that's being appointed and Congress. And so I think we expected that. I think there are some controversial issues around healthcare in America, and specifically around the way in which Americans are viewing how healthcare should be carried out in the United States. Great concern around the health of Americans and our focus on the health and being able to ensure that equitable health care happens, and access to health care, most importantly, for all Americans. So I think those are going to be some of the key points that they're going to be requesting that he respond to. And as you can see through the testimony, he did provide an overarching view, but there was obviously lots of questions around how he plans to carry out the business of health in the United States. And as you asked, the second question was around the number of confirmation hearings left. There are quite a few left. Obviously, there's going to be all new heads for the various agencies. And obviously, there's new agencies being developed as a result of the new administration. So we can probably guess that there will be more hearings similar to this one. And potentially, we could see the president having to potentially appoint other individuals if they're not able to pass through Congress.
Maria, thanks again. Eight hostages that have been in Hamas captivity have been released as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal in place. 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals were released earlier today in the third round of releases since the ceasefire began on January 19. Israel is now expected to release Palestinian prisoners. The release of over 100 prisoners was delayed after hostages were released in chaotic scenes in Gaza, as 7 hostages to Israelis and 5 Thais were released in Khan Yunis earlier. Hundreds of people swarmed around the Red Cross convoy. One of the Israeli hostages, Abel Yehud, was seen being led through the crowds by masked gunmen, which Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said they were shocking scenes. And the 8th hostage, Agam Berger, was released separately in Jabalia earlier. The Thai Ministry of Foreign Affairs has thanked countries that helped in the hostage release, giving heartfelt congratulations to the released hostages' families and expressing deep appreciation to Qatar, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, the United States. The hostages have been transferred to hospital for medical checkups. Syria's de facto leader Ahmed al-Sharaa has been named president for the transitional period. This is coming after 7 weeks after he led the rebel offensive that overthrew Bashar al-Assad. According to the Sana news agency, rebel military commander Hassan Abdul Ghani also announced the cancellation of Syria's 2012 constitution and the dissolution of the former regime's parliament, army, and security agencies. As President al-Sharaa would form an interim legislative council to help govern until the new constitution is approved. All rebel groups which opposed Assad in the 13-year civil war will be dissolved and integrated into state institutions. The announcements came during an event in Damascus on Wednesday, attended by the commanders of factions who fought alongside the rebel alliance led by Mr. Sharaa's Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The Democratic Republic of Congo is urgently appealing to the international community to intervene in its escalating conflict with Rwanda, accusing Kigali of supporting the M23 rebel group. Speaking at a UN Security Council meeting, the Foreign Minister of the DRC, Therese Kayikwamba Wagner, demanded immediate action, stating that the lives of civilians cannot hang on the political machinery that watches without acting. We demand action. Meanwhile, the United States is condemning the seizure of Goma City, urging the UN Security Council to consider measures to halt the territorial advances by Rwandan troops and M23. Elise Stefanik, U.S. ambassador to UN, adds that America stands in firm support of the Congolese people and of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC.
The United States condemns the seizure of Goma and urges this council to consider measures to halt the territorial advances by Rwandan troops and M23. We stand in firm support of the Congolese people and of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC, and urge Rwanda to respect the same. At the same time, we are watching with concern and deplore the destruction of diplomatic facilities in Kinshasa, and call on the DRC government to respect its obligations to protect diplomatic premises and personnel. We call for an immediate ceasefire, an end to this fighting. Rwanda must withdraw troops from the DRC. Rwanda and the DRC must return to the negotiating table and work toward a sustainable, peaceful solution. We remain deeply concerned about the human rights abuses, displacement, and other impacts on Congolese civilians suffering the brunt of this fighting. Civilians, including the growing number of IDPs and refugees in Sake, Goma, and beyond, must be protected. More than ever, humanitarian actors must be allowed to operate freely and deliver life-saving aid. The rights of all Goma's inhabitants, including former combatants, must be respected. We are similarly concerned that M23's and Rwanda's ongoing advances are opening up a bloody new front to this conflict in South Kivu, which no longer benefits from the roles MONUSCO assumed in the past to protect civilians and facilitate humanitarian assistance. We must not allow this violence to spiral into a wider regional conflict.
The European Union's new ambassador to Nigeria and the Economic Community of West African States, Gautier Mignon, has outlined the Union's plans for the country and the bloc during a press conference in Lagos. He says the EU would want to partner closely with Nigerian authorities at all levels to know their expectations, strategies, and needs, and also to bolster trade, strengthen investment, and positively impact the youthful population of the country. The ambassador adds that he is committed to bringing the EU-Nigeria partnership to a higher level with the aim of positively impacting the Nigerian population. Rescue workers in Japan are trying to pull out a truck driver from a sinkhole that appeared on Tuesday and has since widened. The sinkhole appeared in Yashio City in Saitama Prefecture, near the capital Tokyo, swallowing a truck. Rescue efforts have been hampered by road collapses, and officials have ordered scores of households in the area to evacuate their homes. According to local media, the 74-year-old driver was last heard responding to rescuers on Tuesday afternoon, while emergency crews managed to remove the truck bed from the pool-sized sinkhole. The driver's cabin remains buried under soil and debris. The hole, measuring about 10 meters wide and 5 meters deep, first appeared on Tuesday morning at a road junction. It's believed to have been caused by an underground sewage pipe rupturing. The massive sinkhole also contains a gas pipeline, prompting fears of a potential leak. Officials have issued evacuation orders for 200 households in the surrounding area. And finally, on the program, the Indian Space Research Organization has achieved a historic milestone with the successful launch of its 100th rocket mission on Wednesday. The GSLV F-15 rocket carrying the NVS-02 navigation satellite lifted off from Sriharikota and precisely injected the satellite into its intended transfer orbit. ISRO Chairman Narayan, who recently assumed office, hailed the mission as a landmark achievement, with the launch marking ISRO's first major mission under Narayanan's leadership. India's space journey began in 1979 with the launch of the Satellite Launch Vehicle, that's the SLV.
GSLV core S139 and the 4 L40 strap-ons thrusting simultaneously.
जो strap-on boosters हैं उनका प्रज्वलन लगभग 50 सेकंड.
We're back from space, and that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shaka Rogers.